Okay, recording has started. Hello, everybody, attendees and viewers on our training video page. I'm Tyler. I'm one of the trainers at Big Hairy Dog. We have a short and sweet webinar today about QuickBooks point of sales reports. Not too many attendees, so I may not be able to dig into all of the reports that you want to see. But we will try to cover a few specific ones, and I'm just going to teach you about the interface, some of the report options, the types of reports available, and how to adjust them and make them look good for your purposes. QuickBooks Point of Sale does have a fairly limited degree of customization for reports. I will show you what we can do and make a note of what we cannot do at various times. They are hard-coded into the system, so we do not have much control. Pardon me. We do not have as much control as we might in other scenarios, but we do have a lot. We have lots of information available. Without further ado, we'll briefly look at what we're going to talk about today, the multiple different types of reports. These generally refer to the content that we're going to be pulling out of the system and what we would like to look for. We'll go into some brief details about the types of reports associated with these. QuickBooks does have several dozen built-in reports that we can play with, and I will start showing you those shortly. Some of the modifications that we can make are fairly intuitive and obvious. We want to be able to run reports for different date ranges. This includes this year, last year type date ranges with multiple dates for comparisons. We can select columns up to a certain degree based on what the report contents are and move those around and display or hide data that we may not want to see. We can, of course, filter for departments and vendors, customers, multiple things. I'll show you some of the filtering options. All of these reports can be printed as needed for maybe physical inventory or for bookkeeping. We are also going to talk about how to export them into Excel for other configuration, other uses, maybe like mailing lists for customers, stuff like that. And then we'll go over briefly how to create a report from scratch. It's not so advanced. There is a basic framework that we'll be working with in QuickBooks Point of Sale that'll walk us through. Don't expect too much out of the creating a report from scratch that isn't already available, but it may well be a good tool to have in your back pocket. So I'm going to switch over to the software now. Everybody knows and loves QuickBooks Point of Sale, or they don't.
Quick question.
Please.
Is there a way I can move that little black bar with the time on it and the hand and so on? It covers up part of what you're showing. Does that move on my
Is
screen?
it up here at the top?
It's right down at the bottom right now. It's covering up the held, I think, is it held PO or the POs? I think that's the icon. It's covering that spot up.
I'm not sure why it's covering that up.
I try to click and drag it.
By all means, you may.
Your cursor was under it. Let me see what.
Yeah,
no, I can't seem to move it. Okay. Oh. Well, okay. I'll just ignore it then.
or keep trying. I don't know if that's something on my system as much as it's on yours.
That could be.
And I wish that I could derail this for a moment and hop into TeamViewer and help you out there.
Sorry. No, that's
sorry.
all right.
Well, I'll try to avoid demonstrating data in the lower part of the screen.
Okay.
Right, so I just need to pull up some notes on one of my other screen and we'll get started. I do have a lot of documentation available towards the end of the webinar. I will provide some of that to attendees and also remind you how to find the thorough documentation built into QuickBooks Point of Sale itself. Of course, Big Hairy Dog is here in lieu of documentation because the paper doesn't know what you want. And so we're here to discuss that after the fact. We have some time later to work on that. So to start with, up at the top, fairly straightforward, we have a reports menu, and we're going to start today in the reports center. Okay. One thing to note is that there are various places to open reports within the point of sale system. I might show you some of those later. But for right now, we'll start with Report Center, which is the centralized hub for all of our report needs. When we open it up, we get the Report Center, what do they call this? We'll call it the hub for now. It is sort of the main menu, but it does not have every option for reporting that we may want to use. Things to note are the memorized report sections here. Once we've memorized some reports, that is, set them as our favorites, they will be available here. But we will come back to that after we create some reports and memorize them. I would like to direct you to the top left. We're in the overview section, and we want to go to the all reports section. I have this list in a Word document. We are not going to be covering every single one of these. I don't want to put anybody to sleep, but I have picked a couple and some to point out some highlights that might be most useful. We have multiple sections or types of reports, and each of these has a good long list of pre-configured reports. Now, these are just the default settings for the reports if we were to run these. I'll show you how to customize columns and filters shortly. It will be fairly straightforward. Of note in the sales section is the item summary and receipt details. These are common reports for retailers who are interested in daily totals outside of your end of day procedures or X out reports. We'll also briefly cover X and Z out reports, which are available here. There are graphs or reports with graphs built in that we can play with, just to allow visual reference for some information. But for those of you who like the numbers, you know, reports are here for analytics and for function, not form. The general sales section in the sales section will have a lot of base sales information for you to look at. We'll come back to this and maybe take a look at some reports later, but I want to go down the list. So again, we have item summaries and date comparisons are another good one if you would like to view sales for a time period last year versus this year, or any other date range that you would pick. We can do month by month, day by day. This allows multiple date fields and comparisons. So note that I think this one might be pretty valuable. Mobile sales, briefly, refers to a proprietary feature in QuickBooks Point of Sale. If you do utilize the mobile sales feature, there are reports for that as well as inventory channels, returns, and I'll let you read everything on screen. I do, again, have a collected list of these reports in Word format. If you would just like a reference for that, we can provide that. Going down the list to the cash draw reports, there's only a few here. These are common ones. You can have a payout list. So if you're doing cash drops from the register into the safe, this will give you timestamps and information about the amount of money that was dropped, etc. We have X and Z out. Z out is commonly used at the end of your day. In fact, that's what it is intended for. If you would like to view a previous Z out from a previous day, this is one of the ways to do it. You can see your drawer counts and the closing numbers for a given date range. X out is actually for a snapshot of the day so far. So good way to think about that if you need the refresher. Z outs are end of days, X outs are midday status checks, right? Down the list, we have payment reports. Again, fairly self-explanatory. We have a summary that talks about every form of tender that you took during the given time period. And we have lists for the individual tender types. That is besides cash. Also of note is the report for charge accounts or account charges report. This will show you list of account payment transactions, as it says right there. But this is for folks who have charge accounts for their customers. And by all means, feel free to interrupt me if you have a question, because we want to strike while the iron's hot, and we have plenty of time to go over things. So if something interests you, we can pause and look at that. Next up are customer reports. If you collect demographics, that's useful information. If you're interested in providing an email list or a mailing list to someone like Constant Contact or a marketing group, the customer list will help you achieve that. It can be filtered and sorted for folks who do or do not have contact information on hand. Pretty straightforward customer demographic information such as zip codes. Check a customer sales history. There's other ways to view that for an individual at your register that we're not going to cover today, because we know people like to buy what they know and know what they like. So this might be good if you're sending promotions and you would like to see what's selling hot with a certain demographic of customers. Also in the customer section are reports for your customer orders. So if you took a special order for a customer and you need to check what's on back order still, if you just want to see a snapshot of the orders for today, things that need to ship out, work orders as well, that's all available here. The different types of customer orders are not discussed in this webinar, but my team is always available to refresh you if you have questions about any parts of this software. And the final bit of customers reports are the rewards reports. If you utilize the built-in rewards program, you can see a list of members and the history of rewards earned and redeemed. Trying not to regurgitate what's on screen, but this is just an overview of the available sections at this time. Next up is the items section. These are pretty standard inventory reports, which include detailed information such as price, cost, margin, quantities, what have you. A lot of folks look for different quantities sold, received, on hand. These are some good bases for an SRO report, buying reports, although we have another purchasing section here we'll talk about briefly. We have the summary with activity, which is useful. That again shows you some information about inventory turn, with the option to include sales, and the inventory turn report itself, which focuses on inventory on hand, received, ordered quantities versus sales over 2 time periods. Just a little note about that. Information between a sales multi-date range report and an inventory report will focus on different aspects of the system, but they can be used in tandem to give you a great idea of how you're doing this year versus last year, or something along those lines. The adjustments, as you may know, are just there to keep track an audit trail of price, costs, and change, or price, cost, and quantity changes generally. In QuickBooks Point of Sale, it looks like it mainly covers costs and quantity, but this will let you see a history of changes to the relevant aspects of your inventory. Each of these will be formatted. Any given report will be formatted with specific columns that should be relevant to the report itself. Now we can add and remove columns, so you may consider any of these reports that we're talking about now, including the ones that we covered first, as templates. We will shortly get into how to edit, modify, and customize reports, but just note that these are all pre-built with specific information in mind, and that can be added to or removed from. Purchasing, considered, buyer's reports. You don't need me to tell you what a list is, but we can see details and summaries about outstanding POs and product received into inventory. Again, fairly straightforward, and these are just baselines for us to build out a bigger report that's more relevant to our needs. Employees, for those of you who utilize commissions or the timekeeping system, excellent reports for those purposes, including a weekly timesheet, which might help you if you're going to be using the simple timekeeping. Brief note, QuickBooks Point of Sale is not HR software. It will not allow you to pay your employees necessarily. I believe the accounting software would cover that base. But you can at least monitor and audit the time spent that your employees have checked in or checked out of QuickBooks. Finally, this is not so much a section like the others, but it is here, and it will be populated over time if you start to lean heavily on the reports. Memorized reports are otherwise standard reports that you've decided to place somewhere in a shorter list where it's easier to find. Straightforward enough. Consider them your bookmarks or your favorites. The usage scenario for memorized reports, or rather the best way to utilize it, is to take an existing report, customize it, which is what we're going to do next. Customize your report, get it set up just right, and then you'll memorize it so that it'll have all of the columns and filters that you prefer available, pre-configured, pre-customized in a short favorite list under memorized. If we look at overview, those will show up here. We'll show you when we get to memorizing a report, you may create folders and groups of these reports for different associates or different jobs to help with some organization. But you do have a favorites list, so you're not going to be required to go through the whole thing each time. We'll get a few set up just right, the way we like them, save them to memorized, and they're there when we want them next time. All right? A quick note about financial reports. I do not have the financial software on my system, but next to the reports button is the financial center. If you go in here, there is an activity log. That is the base sort of report that helps you understand how the interaction with the QuickBooks desktop financial software is working. So that is available in Point of Sales if you're integrated with the financial software. Otherwise, I cannot elaborate today too much on the financial reporting. I do not have the desktop financial software to demonstrate for anyone. But again, Big Hairy Dog would be happy to fill in any gaps from this webinar by scheduling a training appointment with someone who does. Many of you may know Daryl. Daryl is our QuickBooks financial guru, and well, he's in quite high demand. He is available to discuss this further, to refresh and train on the financial interactions. We're done with that for now. So we'll go back to reports. And Janet, anything you want to look at today? Otherwise, I'll pick one at random.
Well, we had an incident just yesterday. We have two workstations, and workstation one is the server, the primary one, whatever. They were closing out on workstation two, and I think forgot to run the Z out report. And so since this was coming up, I thought if I could find out how to do that, everything balanced with the information from workstation one, but is it possible to see just what was on workstation two?
It should be possible. From the main station, we would go to the cash drawer section. Now, I do not have a secondary workstation, so I don't know if I'll be able to filter for the other one. But if you do this from the main station, the filter should let you select which store. And of course, I haven't even done a Z out on my system right now. But you know what? We need to talk about how we would customize it as well. And that would help us understand filtering and maybe answer your question, Janet. So we find the report that we want to use. Over on the right is this display button. You also have the I want to menu. But display will either clicking on the report link itself or display will take us right into the report and we can modify as needed. This is a bad example for me to be showing you because I do not have much information to show. Here you go, Janet.
Okay.
So let me back up. You may either open the report with the link or click display. This is sort of a shortcut to run a report. It'll take whatever filters are existing and it'll run it. Once the report opens up in a new tab in our report center, go to the modify button. That's the key here for every report that you wish to view, edit, customize, filter. It's all done with this modify button here. With that, it brings up relevant additional options. These are different depending on the report that we're using. For Janet, if she wanted to view a X out or Z out, and I'm in an X out, let's not go crazy here. Modify, filter data, and here we have a workstation option where if she had multiple workstations, you would be able to check the one that you want to see. Again, for that, you would need to be at the main station, the HQ or the controlling station at your store. I do not believe that one workstation would be able to see another workstation unless it was the main station.
Okay.
Right. Yes, you can certainly filter by workstation and also by cashier, if that makes sense for you.
Mm-hmm.
You can also trim down your Z out report if you're only looking for totals for sales, returns, etc. You can run a day out report or a Z out report for the day just based on specific types of transactions.
Okay.
So those are some of the filter options for the Z out. And Janet, towards the end of the call, maybe we will, I don't know if you have access to your QuickBooks system, but I'd be happy to maybe set up some time to go over this with you at a later date if you need the help. Or want to talk further about it with some real useful data.
Okay.
Unfortunately, I do not have very much transactional information or actual business information in my test environment. But we'll see with a few other reports. I do have some data to look at.
Okay.
Let's go to something like a sales list where I do have information. And maybe we would like to just see a summary of what's sold today. Okay. It'll run with default settings. So at a base level, you can get useful information just by running a report out of the box, as they say. However, if we want more information about the items that we sold, we could again go to modify. Here we have the ability to filter, so by vendor or department, etc., but also add, remove columns. And this may be particularly useful if you find a report that you like and you want just a little more information out of it, or you want to remove the information. That brings up the columns window here. Of note is the left-hand pane where we select our columns by clicking the checkbox or lack of check mark. It's hard to see, but there's a little dot here. The dot, the dot means that it's not visible. The checkbox means it will be visible. That does not change in real time up here, but it will when we click save. Also of note is that you can change the sorting so that your results will be grouped. We'll sort by a vendor. Subtotaling is available if you would like to see details for that segment of product. You may see the subtotals option in many other reports. They're a great way to collect top level data and then break it down. So we'll add, we have margin. I added item description. I want to see that. And I don't have UPCs, but I have item numbers. So Let's use that. And I don't think I gave it an alternate lookup. But that's all you have to do to give yourself more information. If it is not available in this list, however, we will likely be unable to use the QuickBooks point of sale reporting system to add it. If you run a report on items and it doesn't have everything you like, that may be time to export to Excel, and that's a whole nother monster. Exporting to Excel and combining reports. Not here to talk about that today. Please note, though, that the options presented in front of you are all there is. We do not have very much customization ability, the ability to add fields that aren't already coded into the software. Okay, what you see is what you get generally with this. Now I clicked save, nothing happened because it brought me back to the modify window. Because there's oftentimes we'll need to do other modifications before we like it. This is all relevant because you can get a report set up just the way you like it and then memorize it, and you don't have to rebuild your stock report that may not have enough information at this time. So I've added some columns. We filter month to date. A brief note on date ranges. Most reports have a date range associated with it. Something to note is specified versus dynamic date ranges. Custom allows you to set as precisely as you need to. In this case, we set the date here, and then we can set a time over here after we click OK. Everybody knows how to set a custom period of time, but what are particularly useful are the dynamic ranges. All of these will update based on your selection. So last 30 days, straightforward. Month to date, straightforward. It'll update every day, going back to the first of the month. I like to use that as a demonstration, but dynamic date ranges can be very useful if you are running these reports periodically and you'd like to have comparisons. So dynamic date ranges versus custom or manual date entries. And if you can use a dynamic date range and it achieves your effect, it takes a little bit of legwork out of the process. You always have a running total. This year, month to date, we'll go with that. Otherwise, as relevant, you may filter out information from your reports. I do not have much to filter out, but I can show you that, you know, I'm not interested in how many vans I sold this week. So come down to the filter, click the button over to the right. I believe you could type manually into these fields. I think we should test that right now. Department, try that. It's mad at me. And it seems like I cannot type, but that is what this button here is for. So we'll see the list of our departments, vendors, cashiers, tax locations for those of you in multiple states and municipalities. You could dial it down to specific items and item details. If you can think it, you can filter it generally. But again, like the additional columns, we cannot add to this list. We have a hard-coded limit on what's available to filter by as dictated by the original software developers, not Big Hairy Dog. And we just don't have the tools like we do in certain other situations or with other software to modify what's available for our fields, for filters and columns, etc. But it's got practically everything you could ever want and need anyway. Shouldn't be too much of an issue. So we'll go ahead and filter our report month to date, and I want to exclude vans. Something to note, if you're making your filters, make sure that you set this to do what you intend. I almost saved, and I wanted to get rid of vans, not view vans. So we're going to exclude those. I've adjusted the columns that I wanted. Again, nothing has shown up on screen yet. I know this because I wanted the item description to come up on screen. It hasn't been there, but it will. After you've done all of your modifications, you would click Run. Report access level is useful and convenient if you do not necessarily wish your cashiers to see information like cost or margin. Save the report with limited access. I believe most of the default reports are covered in the employee management section at different levels. But when you memorize a new report, you may wish to set a different access level. Now, I've cleaned up this report, I've removed margin and costs, and now I want my cashiers to be able to see this and make their informed decisions with good data. So keep that in mind, that reports can be secured based on the employee settings. I have to check my chat, see if anybody else joined. Looks like not. So I will not be distracted by that. Something interesting that I haven't played with is the ability to change the report appearance. As you see here, it's pretty straightforward. You can change it to be landscape or horizontal, or landscape or portrait. I believe that's a pseudo pivot table for those of you who like Excel. You can rename and add fonts or change fonts as needed. Here we see, I'm customizing a default report, but maybe I want to save this as Tyler's item summary because I'm going to memorize this and put it in the Tyler section. But this helps differentiate down the line.
Okay.
Now, as I was preparing for this, I was looking for the option to copy. I did not quickly find that in time for this meeting. So take it with a grain of salt when you rename a report because it may show up somewhere different when it's alphabetized in the lists. So follow-up conversation is copying reports. And I would just make a note that if you do not have or see the ability to copy a report, be careful. They can be reverted. You can clean them up. The tools go both ways. You can add and remove filters. You can add and remove columns. You can reformat again and again and again. The intention should be to memorize a report with your specifications and your preferences, make that available as a shortcut, and then maybe have the same report in its default format available somewhere else. I would say traditionally we copy the report. I could not locate that in the interface. That's a follow-up item, potentially something I talk about or look at towards the end of this call when we have some Q&A time. That is definitely a best practice. If we can copy a report prior to editing it, it saves us potential heartache if we break the report. I don't think there's much to break in this case. We are not dealing with database queries or coding. This has been optimized and set up so that the pieces fall together. We can't do too much damage. But note that when you give it a new name, I am not sure at this time if it renames the original report or inserts it in line. So be aware, you may be renaming the default report, in which case it may change its location in the list as alphabetized. But that's not as important as making it look cool. Right? So here we see the different parts of the report. The example text helps us correlate to where it is on screen. By clicking the gray box, we get our formatting options. And as relevant, maybe you have a company font or a company color scheme. Since it's an analytical report, not necessarily customer facing, but we don't want to treat it like a marketing document. But this may improve visibility, viewability, it might just make you smile a little bit more when you're looking at otherwise mundane analytical data, right? So we've changed a font. I've renamed my report. You have the option to show footer information. I don't see why you wouldn't want to, since many folks using this have thousands of inventory items and hundreds of customers and thousands of transactions. You want to keep an idea of where you are within the report. When it runs, it'll be multiple pages. I just don't have the data to demonstrate that, but I would say most folks will want to keep page number on there. You would also want to keep your timestamp, just to help you reference and understand that this is what the data said at that time. That's besides the filter, right? So I could be running a month-to-date report. I would want to see that, well, yeah, my date range was through the 5th of April, and I ran it on the 5th of April. It's current. If I ran the 1st through the 5th, but on the 6th, I ran the report on the 6th, maybe that's relevant to you. This is mostly superficial. I won't quite call it aesthetic, but certainly preference type items. At a base level, if you're just looking for raw information, you would never need to maybe adjust the visibility, but then you might. You might see a report that's shallow on one axis and long on another. Maybe we want to pivot it. I don't think that's relevant. I think most of us are used to thinking in terms of receipt line items. So seeing our information left to right is pretty valid, but there are scenarios where maybe you would want to pivot. That's available to the limited degree that it is, landscape versus portrait view. So we'll save our minor changes here. We set up some new columns. We will see an item description show up here soon. We've filtered out some information. Vans should disappear. And we changed the report appearance a little bit. The title will change both in wording and in font, and lots of fun. One more thing, long descriptions is available. It may be more than you need. This doesn't refer to any specific area or descriptive area, but it will report on every bit of information in the relevant column that you've selected. So if you have a very long product description and you don't want to see all of that, A, you may want to remove the column. B, you may want to uncheck long descriptions if that is enabled. Let's turn that on for now for fun. I don't have very much data anyway, so not too worried. Brief note, you may filter to change your date ranges, but the date range is also available at the base level of the modification page. That's again, this is reached by going to the modify button. And of course, on the report itself, it has date ranges. So you don't have to dig down deep to change your date range. But it is available when you're creating filters. Let's run it. All right. So we have a new font, we have a new column. Let's talk about what we might do with these columns, because this might be out of order. I want my item description with the other item details, right? So there are some interface features that many folks may be aware of from other pages in QuickBooks Point of Sale or other softwares. First is the ability to expand a column. You would want to take your mouse cursor and hover over this little diamond formation here. You'll see that in each column where we can utilize this. If a column can't be expanded, that diamond won't show up. But to resize it, hover until you get the arrows, as you see here, and just drag as far as you need to. I don't like words wrapping like this. I would much rather keep my report nice and clean. So if that means just resizing a column, fantastic. You may also move columns. Don't need to look for any particular icon for that. All columns within the reports are movable. You will just hover over the column header until your mouse cursor changes to this pointer finger. Click and hold, drag and drop. And now we have the item number, maybe in a more useful location. It's funny. The header is much longer than the actual item number. You'll find some funny little quirks like that in the reports, but that's why we can adjust our font sizing, stuff like that. You do have the ability to resize your columns, to move them around. Any given report will let you do all of that, okay? All quality of life things. You decide on an area or a process at your company that you want to report on, pick a good report for it, and then play with that report. Really leverage the modify button here. So now that we have a report that we've modified, a couple of basic modifications on here, not a lot of data, we want to save this somewhere where we can run it quickly. I don't want to have to come in and make all my modifications again. I don't really want to go through a big list of reports. So we'll go to our favorite I want to menu. I do want to memorize this report. Okay, so we'll click that. We can give it a new name. I believe this facilitates the copying process that I alluded to earlier, where we like to make copies to keep the original safe. I don't believe we're at risk of breaking any of these reports, but it is helpful to save your customizations. Somewhere where you can reference them and find them quicker without redoing them. And B, you want a visual reference, if only at the report title level, to help you quickly find it again if you start building a long list of memorized reports. So this is Tyler's item summary. And I have created a folder in memorized reports for my own. Let's work on our typo there. And I could click OK, and it will save it to this section of the memorized reports list. So we'll do that. We're going to visit the Manage My Reports option next, so you have an understanding of how the Memorize section works. But before we get there, do we have any questions about customizing? We just went through a lot of that. Don't expect you to remember everything I said, but as long as you remember that the Modify button is here.
Okay.
And that you do have a significant amount of control in the appearance and what is visible, you'll be all right.
Okay.
Again, the modify button is our friend for adding columns, removing columns, changing the formatting. If you have a company font, Big Hairy Dog does when we're being diligent, we try to use a specific font. You can do that. Not necessarily important for the sake of the analytics contained, but there are analytical options here. Again, the ability to add and remove columns, to filter out information in our report that we're not interested in, and to change the appearance as well as the security access on it. So now we've memorized, or we've modified our report, we've memorized it, that is, favorited it. If we were at the report center, the overview page, this is what you get to when you first click reports. We now see in our memorized list, my new item summary. We also see that we have folders of sorts, sections. It's just to help you organize your thoughts. So you don't have to go digging into all reports. You can say, well, I created my summary, my detail list, my open order list, my purchase order quantity due list, and I know exactly where it is and I can come get it, click on it, and we're in.
Good. Okay.
Memorizing is very helpful, especially as you get deeper into working with other reports. Making shortcuts helps a lot. Well, let's talk about the organizational structure of memorized reports very quickly here. At the reports overview or all reports window, frankly, any reports I want to menu, we go to manage my reports. This is specifically to manage the folder structure of your memorized reports. Here we go. So the stock reports, the default reports, will stay unbroken. But now, say I want to make a new version of this with a different filter, I can copy it here. Saves us a little bit of the work that we did on the modifications. Maybe I want to rename this. This is Tyler's boots summary for all the Doc Martin boots that I have. Although I didn't just filter to the boots, this is just the example. And copy it, rename. I'll get rid of that one because I'm actually going to change the name to Tyler's sneakers summary. You can change the description. Maybe if you're changing the filter between your two customized reports, leave a little note about the filter that you used. Filtered for vendor for vans. Okay, something like that. Help you differentiate and identify. Same with the title, but a little more information if that's what you don't want to do. Maybe you have a specific dynamic date range. You want to maybe put the date information here. I have one report that runs month to date. I have the exact same report that runs year to date. Leave a note like that, either in the name area or the description area. Visual references, shortcuts, everybody loves that. This is one of the places where you can do that. Okay, so now I've copied without having to modify another report. It took all of the modifications and applied them to our new version. The only thing it didn't do was change the filtering, which in this example is what I'm doing. I have a report that's going to show me certain types of shoes and another that's going to show me other types of shoes. In my case, I have Vans and Doc Martens. Literally the only shoes I wear right now, switching between my Vans and Doc Martens. But and so I will be filtering for those vendors. In my imaginary store, I buy direct from both companies. Ha ha ha. So I just clicked OK to move on. But if we go back to our overview, the memorized report sections, another way to get to memorized reports, if you're in all reports, it has its own section here. Okay. We first worked on the boots. Now let's go look at our sneakers. Oh, it's still got boots. Well, modify, filter. And actually, in this case, I can just include Vans, and that will filter out the Doc Martens. There we go. This was a summary of item sales. So, you know, it may not have all the information you were looking for in a report, but I'm just trying to teach the tools for any given report. The modify menu, the ability to change your columns, to filter data, to change the appearance to whatever degree you would like, and to work on the security. Every single report is available to do that. Every single report can be modified and then memorized so that you can find it much quicker in the future. If I was to exit the report module, open reports. Now, once you know what report you're using, you have shortcuts in here. But now I don't even have to go to the report center. I could just say, hey, let's look at boots. There we go. So when a report gets memorized, it's much more convenient. Whether or not you are going to make heavy customization. If you're going to be using reports a lot, definitely memorize them because that'll make them more available. Quicker to reference, quicker to find, quicker to view, no fuss, no muss. A little bit of effort up front in doing your customizations means that you can have consistent data as you run your reports over whatever date ranges and whatever filters you choose. But that's, again, another good feature of copying reports is consistency. You don't want to run one item summary and then have different information on another item summary. It's best to have a report that you love and then copy it. Again, that's from Report Center or any report window. I want to manage my reports. This only affects memorized reports. You cannot copy a blank report until you memorize it. You can memorize a default report, no problem. You would maybe have a favorite report that you want to run all the time. You don't need to make any adjustments, but you want to run it frequently. It's available if you just memorize it. Okay, so just a brief note on memorizing and copying. It's a good way to build a library of your favorite custom tailored reports. If you do or do not put in the time to customize them, it's still a great way to be able to reference your frequently used reports. Otherwise, you're stuck scrolling through the list. You know, at the overview page, I have a dozen reports. That was a good guess. At the all reports page, I have 100 reports. Memorizing saves you this time, and it's ready to be run without any fussing. That's again why I like dynamic date ranges when I filter reports, because then I can run it and I understand that it is accounting for the time change, the difference in yesterday's report and today's report. That's year to date, month to date, things like that, right? I'm going to look at my notes and see if I missed anything special. Yeah. Want to briefly show you that you can print either to a printer or to PDF. Almost every Microsoft computer has this Microsoft Print to PDF option. It's a great way to convert something into PDF format if you need it. Now, this is a report. So whether or not you print it, there's a good chance you may wish to export it. All of the reports have this Excel button up here. Click it, it does the trick, and it just opened right up for me with my Microsoft Excel. Okay, and it did not give it a file name. This is a unsaved Excel file. So if you do export, just make sure to click save, file save as. I'd say that's almost all of it. We're coming up on an hour. I feel bad for anybody who has to watch this whole thing and not interact with us. But we want to be thorough. And while my data in my demonstration system may not be thorough, I'd like to at least cover every little option that we have. So the final thing is that we can create a report. This is a little misleading and it's not so daunting. It works on the existing framework in the system. QuickBooks knows the types of columns and information that you may want to use for any of these given categories. So it's going to help us build a new report, but on a framework. If you are going crazy or you don't find a report that you like, that is just right, that you can't modify, create a new report might be for you. We will do an inventory report. I wanted to demonstrate sold and received and on order if I can. I did not get a chance to test this, so join me for the ride. We're going to create an item list, the option to filter by department, vendor, and more. You can start a report with a graph if the list of reports with graphs does not have what you want. I believe there are sales graphs, and we have inventory graphs. No, so if you want inventory information in a graphical format, that'd be how you do it. Inventory graph. I'm not going to make a graph report right now because it's not so common that folks want it. But we have an hour of discussion after I turn off the recording, Janet. If you want, we can play with that. Let's open an item list. And now it's our friendly modify window. Slightly different name, but it's the same features that we talked about earlier. It doesn't have a pre-built report, so from the beginning, it's going to suggest what it believes you want in a standard report based on the type you select. We're doing an item report. It says, well, maybe you want this item information. Well, actually, I'm not looking at attribute or size today. Maybe department and vendor is still useful. And I think I want to see my pricing. But my goal is to see my on-hand quantity, my on-order quantity, and other quantities. Available might be useful. I'm trying to make a buying report, a purchasing report here. So available, what is on order for customers? Looking for, we can always set a few that we like, start working on our report, and come back and add more fields. Don't want to take up too much time here as we look for specific fields to add here. But I think I've got almost what I want now. And I am going to, we'll sort by department, that's fine. Filter, I don't need to do any filters at this time, but as always, they are here. The date range is not available when creating a report. It's available when you're running the report after the fact. So don't worry about setting a date range necessarily in this view. The filters are not permanent. The columns are not permanent. This is just building us a frame to work on because we don't like what we saw somewhere else. So we didn't find a report that was exactly what we wanted, so we can build from scratch. But these are not permanent filters. They can always be modified after we've tested our report. I'm not going to worry about the appearance at the moment or the access level. I do have a lot of documentation that might be more concise and useful than I could be. So if you're watching this, don't hesitate to reach out and ask for information about the reporting documentation. Here we go. I've got a list of my inventory. I see what I've got on hand. I think I want all of my quantities over here. Another note, the little dot or arrow denotes that you are sorting by that column. This gray blue dot means that I am not sorting by the column, but I can sort by the column. Here it is subtotaling by accessories. It's a good example of a departmental subtotal, potentially useful information. It breaks it out, makes it more visible. And then if you want the breakdown, you can go find it. Another note is that the way this magnifying glass changes, I believe that means that you can view more information if you double click with it. Yes. And it takes us into inventory view because we checked an item. I'm going to exit that. We don't need to play with that. But note that in your report, double clicking on a line can present you more extra information, more details, if it's not already on your report. So on order, I didn't get a sold quantity. Sold, received, and on order is a common report for buyers and purchasing teams. But here at least I can see what I have on hand and what's on order and what's available. Available being what is not committed. right? On either a sales order generally.
Hmm.
Lots of columns, lots of stuff to do. So, play with it, tailor it to your needs. But, we just built this report. It does not have a special name at this time. So maybe I want to memorize this. Okay, the modify button is here so we can keep working on this anytime we want to. Your reports are not permanent unless you never touch them again, but all of these reports can be customized. So we'll save it into my folder, and now we see in our memorized section, item, our new report lives there. I'm not sure I mentioned this. Manage my reports. Click new type to create a new folder. That's important. If you have multiple staff with their own reports, this is Penny. Penny is one of the owner's dog. She's also one of my quote unquote customers in my fake store here. All right, now Penny has a section. And that just could potentially help you as you start customizing and memorizing reports. We all love organization and folder structure. Once we get used to structuring, using folders and groups like this, I'd say you never turn back. But you may not need it. By default, My Reports exists, and you can add memorized reports to this section. They'll still show up, readily available under the all report sections of memorized reports. So, but it is useful if you're going to be customizing a lot to utilize the Manage My Reports tool to create folders or containers. All right. That a little longer than I intended, but I believe we covered about everything I had in my notes. Janet, stimulate any new thoughts?
Well, I was taking notes and noting things. I've played around with reports, but have I think I've kind of stumbled through it. Now I feel like there's a little more rhyme and reason to it. So I think
Right.
that's helpful. Yes.
Well,
Yes.
and here's the icing on the cake for you, because you're probably not going to want to come back and watch the webinar again. But everything that I have discussed is available in the point of sale software with the help menu. I cannot say enough how much this helped me prepare for this webinar. Click help. You can pull it off to the side. I have another monitor, you just can't see it. And you can work in point of sale while that's open. So you can have the reference available. And as you see, there's so much. I recommend clicking help when you're in a specific section, like reports, like sales orders, purchase orders, or point of sale. It will take you straight to the section that you want. Otherwise, don't be afraid to clean up your list with the plus and minus buttons. There is a whole section on reports with all of the information that we covered today, all of the processes that we covered today, as well as extra descriptions of the reports themselves. So this is an excellent resource. It's better than the PDF file that I have. I have this PDF guide from Intuit, and they're everybody's favorite right now. And it's simplistic. It's a great overview of it, but the help menu built into point of sale will really walk you through everything we covered on the webinar today. And that little link there is available throughout the software. Now, I would love to talk to you all and have more training time and continue learning myself. But at Big Hairy Dog, it's kind of our policy to work ourselves out of a job. We want to give you as much information as possible. And, if I can help you not pay for training, and keep your tech support hours available for those emergencies. Fantastic. This help section has just about all of the documentation that I could hope for supporting point of sale. Lots of excellent information, and certainly lots of information about your reports.
Okay. Sounds good.
Great. Well, thank you, Janet, my one attendee today.
Well, thank you. I enjoyed it.
I'm glad I could give you information that you didn't have before, and show you where you can find more. And if anybody is watching this recording after the webinar, don't hesitate to reach out to us. Don't hesitate to use the help menu, but please don't hesitate to reach out to Big Hairy Dog. We can set up an appointment and focus on any of these reports that you would like to customize or work on. All right. So otherwise, thanks for joining and watching. Normally, I would stay on the webinar for another hour, but if my sole attendee doesn't have any further questions, that's it for today.
Thank you. I like how you went slow enough. I could see where you were clicking and doing whatever. That was very helpful.
I think that's why they made me a trainer instead of a tech support guy.
Okay. Well, thank you very
Patience.
much.
Oh, thank you for being a great audience for one person. So have a great day. I think we have another QuickBooks webinar coming up in May on sales orders and SO fulfillment. So keep an eye out in your email for that. Or go to bighairydog.com. In the customer center, we have a training and webinar section for you to check out. All of the videos from past webinars are there, and the registration link for the next webinar session will be available free of charge to all of our customers. Great.
Thank you.
Have a good one, Janet.
Thanks. Goodbye.
Bye.